All right. Well, we'll get started. I actually came across a scripture. That's what I was doing a minute ago. And there's a number of scriptures about the Lord chastening his people. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 says, "My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction." Uh, the Lord wants us to, sometimes he does correct us, and sometimes that can sting a little or it hurts when we need to repent. But this proverb reminds us not to despise that. Don't be weary of his correction, because the Lord always does that because he loves us. And I think that is something to remember. And anytime we're offering correction to people, if we do it with the right motives, it'll come across in the right way. So I thought that applied really well to what we're dealing with this week with corrective action and things like that, discipline, which we do run into at work. So I wanted to share that brief thought with you. And I'll go ahead and say a prayer this time, if that's okay. Heavenly Father, we're grateful to gather in this online setting, and we ask that thy Spirit be with us to guide our discussion. We also ask that others who join here shortly will be able to benefit from discussion. We're thankful for our opportunities with BYU Idaho and the things that we enjoy, and bless us with learning and new insight. And we do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Well, so any questions on, so just wanted to jump into both topics. Definitely wanted to go over this airport case. I know some of you have met with your groups already, but also wanted to see if you had questions about any of the wage and hour stuff, any payroll questions.
Well, not really a question. I just found it interesting there was so much focus on what was paid and done in the state of Idaho, when the majority of the students are not going to be from the state of Idaho, and some of them are going to live there for a short while. But it was just really, I expected more of a focus on federal laws.
Okay, yeah. There is a lot, and you know what? Each state is so different. It does get very interesting. So, for any of you that work in payroll, I mean that's its own set of laws and rules, and you have to stay up to speed on a lot. So, yeah, in my workplace, of course, I'm located in Idaho, but when I'm covering other sites, other locations, they all have different laws and different rules. Or if somebody quits, there's different regulations on when their final pay is owed to them, and you have to facilitate all of that. So it gets interesting. The main thing I wanted to point out was that the update to the Fair Labor Standards Act with the overtime regulations, and that kicks in. That just came across. That's brand new stuff. They announced that, and then we had a big meeting at work, and they said, well, this might be effective May 1st. So we're all biting our nails a little bit, but they actually gave us till December 1st. They raised the minimum level of wage that's considered salary. So it's going to be a game changer for a lot of organizations. Rosemary, you emailed me that question last night about that threshold. We've got, in my place where I work, we have a number of supervisors that make $29,000 a year. They're full time, they're team leaders, but they're at $29,000 a year salary. So companies have to make a decision. Do they bump them up to the $47,000, or do they limit their hours and make sure to monitor overtime, or do they pay overtime, time and a half pay, or do a little bit of both? So thankfully, that's why they give us some time. So we have till December to get that all lined up. So. But I think it's a good thing. I think it's up for debate for some folks, but I think it's a good thing.
Oh, do you want the debate now?
What's that?
Do you want the debate now? For any,
Sure. Yeah,
for
let me know
any
what you think.
company that has to raise the rates, what they pay somebody, they're going to have to raise what they charge other people. So while this sounds really great and wonderful, somebody's going to make $10 an hour instead of $8.25 or something like that. Pretty soon
Hmm.
this will, I mean, it's built-in inflation and it will go across the board. And if McDonald's has to do it, Burger King has to do it, if they have to do it, the mom who babysits kids is going to have to raise her rates so she can afford to take the kids for a treat once a week. And it's a snowball rolling down the hill. It's just going to keep growing and going and hitting into other things. And, so uh, what I would see as progression is seeing that would be more money percentage wise than 30, 40 years ago instead of just more money.
Yeah.
I'd like to see, okay, if my mortgage is going to go up 40% to accommodate this rate change, it's not going to be any help. I don't care who gets a rate change. And then there's a whole herd of people who won't get it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's challenging, and I think a lot of what you're referring to, Rosemary, is if we raise the minimum wage, and you're talking about hourly wage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that definitely has impact. So, who knows what's coming down the pike with that. Um, this change is specific to how they designate who is salary and who's not. So
Yes.
it, it,
But it will have the same effect across the board.
it could. It definitely limits. So any person that's salaried that's making below that 47,000, it definitely limits their ability to work extra hours without companies having to compensate them for that. So um, that's where that decision comes in, and they'll have to analyze the cost and say, okay, is it worth it? Is it more cost effective for us to bump them up to the new threshold, or do we just need to move them to hourly and pay them time and a half? So yeah, it'll bring some changes, and so we'll see. I work for a corporation, so we'll see what our corporate offices decides to do. We have some managers that are just right below that 47, so I think they'll definitely just get a raise and get bumped up. But the team leaders, it's going to be interesting. So, yeah, and that's why I said it's definitely debatable. Definitely one of those economic discussions that can go either direction. So, we'll see how that goes. um, any other questions?
Well, I'll make another comment. I think we'll see a lot of corporations in states, especially that have laws that you don't have to give a reason for firing somebody. I think that people that are so in what they do are just at a point below that rate, rather than raising their rate or keeping them, they will fire them and hire somebody else, but not hire them on salary so they don't have to meet that law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of ways that companies will make that decision. So yeah, it'll be interesting toward the end of the year what starts happening. So
Like, the bottom line means a lot. There's hotels and casinos down here that when Obamacare went into effect, they got out their little calculators and they happily figured out that for the first so many number of years, it would be cheaper for them to pay the penalty rather than to provide health insurance for their people. And a whole lot of them fell on that bandwagon. And some people
mm,
who'd had wonderful insurance got kicked in the teeth.
yeah, difficult stuff, really is. So and the challenge is it becomes very political. So I think all we can do is look ahead, especially if we're running a business or decision makers, learn how to think through those issues and do our best to do what is right, whatever that might be. So it's challenging. It is. It's challenging as things change and as environments change. What about you, Isaac? So in Mexico, what are the wage and hour laws like down there?
Well, wages are really bad, to be honest with you. So, like a typical worker makes about, oh, that's a good one. Let me just do some quick math. So they make about 6,000 to 8,000 pesos a month, which is roughly about 350 to $450 a month. Like the minimum wage here is like $3 a day, about four, almost four. So like there is this meme going on that pretty much they start listing all of the expenses that we have that that a typical family has. The actual salary of someone is roughly about 6,000 pesos, and like all of the expenses come over a little over 12 to 14,000 pesos. And like everyone's like going like, how does Mexico manage to keep up with all those expenses? And they put the president of Mexico saying, well, I don't know and I don't care. As long as they leave, I don't care. Like wages are really bad down here, like really, really bad. Um, I mean, I'm very fortunate to make roughly above $1,000 a month, and that's people are like super shocked that I make so much money compared to like most of my ward.
Hmm.
So it's interesting because if you work for like a local company, they don't pay really well. But if you work for a foreign company, they pay really, really well compared to your typical company. Especially if you speak English, like wages they go up around $2 per hour. So I mean that's about $3, up to $3, and that's a good amount. But if you speak Spanish, you earn like half
Hmm. That's
or even
interesting.
less than that. So
What about overtime? Do they pay overtime down there?
yes, so typically after you work 40 hours a week, um, they will start paying. After the first hour and on, the first 9 hours are considered double pay. So let's say I make $2, per hour. On overtime, I would make $4 per hour. If I reach, if I exceed 9 hours, I believe starting the 10th hour of overtime during the same week, it goes triple. That's on
Hmm.
most
Okay.
companies, but they really, I mean, it will depend a lot on the type of company you work for, because most companies, like most Mexican companies, won't allow overtime unless it is really necessary. In my previous job, because we're a call center and we work for the airline industry, overtime tends to be kind of expected during the month. And I mean, they pretty much don't care about the law. I mean, they pay you, what the law, you know, expects you to be, to be paid. That is one thing that I do like. However, that if you do overtime, they gotta pay for it as overtime. They can't compensate. They can't give you days off, or they can't like pay you half. They gotta pay double, like literally. So 4 hours of overtime equals to one regular day pay, payday. So that's better.
Okay.
And I would pull anything about 20 to 25 hours a week, depending on how much money I needed. So it was really good money.
Great. Well, thank you. I was just curious. So very, very good. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So we'll see. These changes are coming. We'll see what comes down the road. And there are goods and bads, and then especially with raising that hourly wage, that is a difficult thing economically, especially in
Yeah,
certain industries.
I think I had read, and I think that was what you guys were talking while I was taking a little break. Um, you were talking about, like, I heard that they were trying to get, wages, like, raised for McDonald's and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, like, if you're gonna raise wages, then you gotta raise prices and other costs. So at the end of the day, it's not gonna be as beneficial as you wish to. Plus, I mean, if you were looking for a better job, well, you can always look for a better job. You're not, it is not expected you're gonna work, throughout the rest of your life in a, like a fast food restaurant or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. It makes you think of other principles like self-reliance, personal development, education, things like that. So,
Yeah, especially, it's at least here, we have them like if you're working at a fast food restaurant, that's because one, you really, really, really don't have like little education and companies are not hiring you, and two, it's just a temporary job, like just in the meantime. It's rare to hear about someone at a fast food restaurant to have worked more than 3 years. So, and that's a lot of time. And it's usually students only that are, studying in high school or they just started, with their university. Not even university, to be honest with you. Like it's a very bad pay.
it's true. Hi, Ashley. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So Ashley, we were just talking about the pay stuff, the wage and hour laws a little bit, and then the overtime regulations that just changed. And Rosemary made the point that things were going to continue to change. So, and each state is different. It just makes it a lot of fun. So,
Mhm.
and then we wanted to jump in now to a little bit of the Logan Airport. I know some of you have met and discussed this, but how was that? What do you think? So we got Mr. Oh, I forget his name. Sanchez. Mr.
Sanchez.
Sanchez and his boss, Mina. So how should they respond? First of all, let me back up. Have any of you had to ever issue corrective action at work? Any of you in that kind of position? To write somebody up or give a warning or anything like that? Or
Yeah, I've written up
terminate?
people. I've terminated people.
Okay. So how do we go about that? What is the thought process, or what should it be?
Well, in my case, when I had to terminate someone, I had to determine whether it was, to poor performance or, did he comply with all the rules or did he fail to meet any expectations. So my first, thing was, reviewing like the situation. In my case, the person didn't speak Spanish nor English fluently, so training was really hard for me. And but he got assistance from the French supervisor, so he had all materials and everything in French. So it's like, okay, I'm not being unfair. I mean, I'm having someone else also helping me out. Then I had to evaluate like what were the benefits and like the consequences of firing the person, and especially like what the action or things that had happened, like what impact had towards the company. In our case, I had to fire the guy because one, because of language issues, and two, because he did not have sufficient computer skills which are required for a company. He barely knew how to use the computer. So that would have been very hard for us, especially when you have a customer that just missed a flight. You have less than, let's say 10, 20 minutes to rebook a flight, and that's hard at times. In the case for the TSA, my concern fell on the fact, that he had violated very strict policies, and those policies, represent like a tremendous damage towards the TSA, and airlines were affected and passengers were affected. So, and it's something that he shouldn't have done what he did. Pretty much, he knew the rules, he broke them, and it's not something small. Something you could just pretty much reprimand or just like correct in private. Is something that a lot of people noticed as well, and that had a huge impact.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So he broke rules. What do you guys think? So if you're Mina, what are you thinking right now?
Oh shoot! I gotta fire someone.
Yeah, I think she was just in a really hard position because the case study was saying how much she valued Sanchez and how much she enjoyed coming to work because of him. So I think that it kind of put her in a really tough position because if she doesn't react and discipline him in the appropriate way, then the other workers are going to see that happen, and then her superiors are going to see that. So she's kind of in the middle of the situation where she knows she has to take disciplinary action, but she doesn't know quite what that should be.
Yeah. What do you think, Rosemary?
What do I think? To some extent, I think O'Reilly was suckered in by Sanchez's charisma. And, he was a very personable person and did really well with customers. Apparently, I think it's quite probable he had done this before and just not got caught or reported, or people let it slide because he was probably seen by other workers as O'Reilly's favorite. I mean, there he was out on the floor, and it was a passenger who reported it, not other people who, according to the chart, would have been in the same vicinity and probably should have seen him on the cell phone to begin with, not just the passenger seeing somebody else run through.
Okay. So there could be some favoritism, some perceptions that could be brought in if we don't act or respond to this. Yeah.
I
That
think.
never happens, does
Oh, never.
it? You guys been in those situations where, there was somebody, a low performer or whatever, and there's no consistency and nothing gets responded to? I think we've all been there.
I was, and I pretty much had to tell myself, well, in Spanish we say you can't touch your heart, as in, you can't let your feelings, influence on your decision. So, and one of my bosses said pretty much just like, if your job was on the spot, would you vouch for that person? I was like, nope. And but it got me thinking, and in this case, like, I know he's like a very likable person. Everybody likes him. He makes the job easy, but he knew the rules, and he knew, he perfectly knew that, failing to meet, that, if they missed something, or and if they hadn't looked at the situation, or if a passenger had passed by, they knew they were going through something potentially, dangerous, especially in the Logan Airport. So, I can't touch my heart, but unfortunately, I would have to fire him because he perfectly knew he shouldn't have used his cell phone at work, and I had to fire someone because of that before. So,
Okay.
tough luck, mate.
Yeah, yeah. Was this his first offense? So Rosemary mentioned that probably not, but the case showed us a little bit of that, didn't it?
Well, it said that I think what happened is that he had a test or something, or something where he's a little bit behind, and he got help getting through that, or was given another opportunity.
Yeah, let's see. He had actually taken some additional training because he was behind.
Yeah.
They put him through that up training, right? So performance-wise, he had some issues.
Yeah.
And so if he was just on his phone and a passenger didn't get into that sterile zone, would that change the situation for Mina? What do you think?
Okay,
He
would you
would have.
repeat that?
Oh,
Just, looking at it a little different, if it was just the fact that he was using his phone, um, but let's say he was just using his phone, but crossed that threshold, would that change the way that we look at this?
Well, to the footnotes, TSA had a really strict policy that forbade using cell phones on the job, except in the case of personal emergencies after notification of the supervisor. And
Right.
so, with the training, he did have that knowledge. In our group study, we discussed some of the reasons why he might have slipped up and felt like maybe it's okay or just this one time. But we looked at it and we could see where the TSA was at fault as well.
Oh, okay.
it's the same. It's like the same situation with a friend of mine. I mean, rules were you can't have your phone, while you're on floor. That's a rule. You can't have it. Turn on, turn off, whatever. You can't have the object itself. So the guy, comes in and he pulls it out. I'm like, I'm sorry, dude. I gotta give you a final warning. Like, And he was like, no, you're kidding. I'm like, no, you know the rules. Like, I can't let this go by. Funny note, I was authorized to have my phone on the floor because they had stolen my previous phone. So the guy was like, I mean, that's really unfair. But and he started complaining, but he eventually accepted the final warning. But he was terminated like a week after because he pulled out his phone again.
Hmm.
So, and another guy, I just heard he was fired on the spot because he had his phone on the floor. Because you're told from day one you can't have it. Now, had the supervisor known, what, I have an emergency or I got a call or do this, that would have changed the scenario different, like completely. But because it pretty much just shows that he was like, I'll just take a minute. It shouldn't, I don't think nothing bad's gonna happen. I mean, that kind of attitude, the fact, if Mina does not take an action on it, people are gonna fall for the same thing. Are gonna be like, oh, the third guy didn't get an issue or a warning or any discipline. Let's just pull out our phones. I mean, nothing's gonna happen to us. So, I mean, you can't be that flexible at all. You broke the rule.
Yeah.
You knew. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's the question. So, hey, they had the phone out once. Um, that opens up the door for them to do it again. Or, do you coach on that and give them the opportunity? That's the balance. And though, if you go into HR or if you're a manager, you're going to be making those type of decisions all the time. So it's challenging. Rosemary, you mentioned that in your group, you mentioned TSA could be at fault. Do you want to highlight what you guys talked about there?
Okay, well, I'm going to read you from the study. TSOs were rotated throughout the screening station positions, such as operating the X-ray machine or checking travelers' documents, in the course of their 6 to 8 hour shifts in order to prevent errors caused by fatigue. But then later on, it says Sanchez had worked until 8 p.m. the night before the day of the security breach. He had started his second shift at 3 a.m. that Sunday morning. So only 7 hours between shifts, they were letting him pick up some overtime. There had to be travel time, maybe take a shower, eat some food, all that in between. So he was going in fatigue, what they were claiming they tried to prevent happening to their employees. And so for them to allow that coming back in that soon after a regular shift, some of them at fault putting a fatigued person on because a fatigued person will not perform as clearly. They've shown that in driving. They've shown that, unfortunately, in the medical field where doctors sometimes put in 24-hour shifts just because that is how it is set up. Uh, there's just that fatigue factor. You know, sure, he talked to his daughter, and he probably hadn't had a chance to talk to her or check on her. Uh, he might not have been thinking straight, you know, but that's some of what we discussed.
You know, and
Call
there's
out,
something
yeah.
there's something cultural, at least for me, because at least our company, like if you wanted to do overtime, because there's people at work that would we used to have the 4 a.m. shift, and we used to close at 8 p.m. So sometimes people who were in need of having money, they will work straight from 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. or for several days in a row. And regardless, or at least that's Mexico. Not sure. I'm getting more familiar with the U.S. with this class, and I really like that. At least in Mexico, if you are doing overtime, you are expected to perform 100%, regardless, whatever's going on. So if you're fatigued and you're doing overtime, it is your responsibility. I mean, even though technically I'm just paying you to do your job, and if because of fatigue or whatever reason you're not performing well, then like just don't perform at all. Like just don't do overtime. Just go back home, get a good sleep, and see you tomorrow. And there's this guy, he got a final warning because he was so fatigued that he was doing his calls really bad, and he actually broke one of our security rules. But they were like nine, they were calm, they were very cool with him because the guy, was pulling an immense amount of hours and was pretty much saving the company. They were very flexible there. But still, our company is really weird, so I don't know. But point is, like, if you're doing overtime, you're agreeing that you will be 100%, you'll be ready to perform regardless of whatever situation. At least that's how it works in Mexico.
Right. No, that's a good point, but I really love this call out because TSA, it's a high security job.
Hmm.
You're protecting the airways, you're protecting the airlines. It's a high safety protocol situation. So if you're allowing someone to work those extra hours, yeah, that could be TSA needs to look at. I like it. So Isaac, you would fire Mr. Sanchez, right?
Yeah, but I hadn't considered the overtime thing.
All right. What about the rest of you? And hi, Tammy, by the way. Welcome.
Well, my connection is bad. I'm going to try again, and I'm going to hang up and then call back.
Okay. What about you, Ashley? What do you
Okay.
think?
I really liked what Isaac just said because I think that when workers sign up for a position, they need to kind of come and fulfill the commitments that they made. So I think this is kind of a tough position because everyone's trying to point fingers at the other person, but the fact of the matter is that Sanchez was on his phone and he doesn't have just kind of like an ordinary job where, if you're like working like a cash register or something, he like has a really high security job where if that person that got through actually was a terrorist, it could have been really bad. Um, so he knows that even a few minutes can make the difference of a breach in national security. So I don't know. I kind of think that he should have known better or told his supervisor that he needed to step aside and use the phone.
Yeah, and adding to that point, and I'm trying to think, and I think I might be, have a different perspective, but what does fatigue, and your cell phone have to do, or being tired? Like that kind of threw me off a little bit, but I don't know. I guess it's the way, that I was used to at work. I guess that makes me acquire a different perspective.
Well, I think it's something for TSA to look at, and Rosemary mentioned it could affect decision-making quality. Bad decision, not to other things, but at the end of the day, I think he did it. What
And
about you, Rosemary?
excuse me.
Oh, Go ahead.
You give break rules, but the way the layout of the security station is shown, Jared Davidson brought this up. Others should have been able to pretty clearly see what he was doing, and yet nobody reported him. And even, I don't think his cell phone was reported. I think the person running through was what was reported. And the cell phone probably came out later, so either people were doing the wink and nodding for each other, or they weren't paying that close attention to what was really going on.
Very good point. Yeah. Now, the cell phone was one thing, but the passenger getting through was the other. So I think, if I had any takeaway for you guys for this is a little bit what you alluded to, is we got to look at impact. What's the impact of what happened? I mean, yeah, if this passenger, he was just happened to be running to get on the plane, but what if he had a bomb? Terrible, terrible impact, right? And so we have to look at that. And I think that's the biggest thing. So, in my industry, we deal with clients, so we're always dealing with client impact. How client impacting was that behavior? Or especially if the behavior is illegal, or we get into harassment and stuff like that. But look at the impact, and that can help guide us through that decision. Tammy, any thoughts on Mr. Sanchez? How you would handle this situation?
Well, I felt so bad for him because part of me. I know. I completely agree that it had a huge impact. But I just felt so bad that he's a single dad, and he was calling his daughter to try and get her to do her studies, and he had been just an exemplary employee, and he worked hard, and so in that respect I felt bad for him. But I do agree that it's when you, especially after 9/11, you just can't, you don't know, you never know when something could happen, and you have to always be on alert, right? And so I do agree that, I don't know, that I think at a minimum there needs to be like a huge disciplinary action taken. Just because the thing is that even though he's an exemplary employee, if you let that go, without some kind of consequence, then that's kind of setting a precedent for maybe the next thing that happens. So, I don't know. Maybe you already said all of that.
It's national security.
True.
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
Yeah.
Because your heart gets involved too. So, what other options does O'Reilly have?
Well, didn't it say that she has? I can't remember. So she said another option would be to relegate him to a station that required a lower security clearance. A lane monitor. Well, so he already had the lowest security clearance, right?
Yeah.
He was already there.
He was already there when the incident happened.
Right. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's tough and so you want to look at impact. You also want to look at the previous trends.
Well, and I think he had one review or one like recertification or something like that he didn't do well on, and he had to be recertified in that.
Mm-hmm.
But he worked there for 8 years, didn't he? He worked there for a long time.
Yeah, 8 years.
Great. People really liked him, and he was conscientious, but yeah, that is.
tough one. So it's something you talk through, and this comes up. I mean, you look at the impact, you look at the person, you look at the previous behavior, and you have to make a decision.
So what would you do?
What would I do?
Yeah.
Oh, I think so. I'm all for giving people opportunity to make changes and do better, but he's had some previous performance concerns, and because there was that direct breach,
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely counsel with those in the company or those above me as well. But this would probably lead to a termination in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think he must have been pretty involved in his conversation, even though it said he was only on the phone for a little bit. If he didn't even see somebody go by, right? Apparently, the guy was running.
Mm-hmm.
So he must have been very involved in his conversation.
Because what it turns into is you want to do what's right for Mr. Sanchez, but you also have to do what's right for the company and the rest of the employees. And because this is this high impact situation every day, you miss one thing, you got a gun on an airplane.
Right.
So I think I would have to lean towards termination.
Yeah.
But if it was reviewed and there was, you're looking at this as a separate instance, maybe that demotion down to a different spot in the line would be positive, because maybe we looked at it a little bit like Rosemary mentioned, saying, okay, well, we allowed him to work these extra hours. That's on us to manage that. We have policies of 6 to 8 hours. We didn't follow that. All kinds of things. So really, these get very fascinating because you have to look at all the different factors of who was negligent where.
Right.
But if it were me, because of that negligence, we'd have to respond and probably do what's best for the airline.
Yeah.
But that's not to say I'm right. That's just probably where I would lean on that one.
Do we have an ending to this case anywhere?
I was going to look it up. I didn't see it in the content, but sometimes you can hop online and take a look too. So I'll see if I can get the conclusion.
So
I can tell you what they tell the group leaders, but then it doesn't tell you what happened after that. And I tried looking that up and couldn't find it. What it told should I say what it told the group leaders?
Sure.
What it told the group leaders was that 2 months later, he didn't get fired, and 2 months later he had another incident, but they didn't say, well, and there's another breach of security, but they did not say what happened as a result of that. And I found myself, well, we all wondered what happened. What was the end result?
Another breach, though, huh?
Okay, it says 2 months later he caused another serious breach. And the one caused was pretty serious because of how it affected flights and people across the nation. But, there again, I look at how the airport has this set up. And they're almost asking for some breaches of security because things are so. If somebody can just go running through like that without having to go through gates or turnstiles or something, there again, I'm not defending what he did, but I'm saying the opportunity is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, there always is, and definitely if this was a first-time offense, I would just say, hey, let's put him on a different spot, give him some more opportunity. But if there's a pattern and we've addressed it, then that's what allows us to move forward. So that's the big takeaway when we're talking about discipline, is it's often referred to as progressive counseling. You don't make one mistake and say you're out unless it's something egregious. It really, the way I would say it is, no one should be surprised when they get terminated.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good statement.
Because we know the rules, we know the policies where we work. If I've gotten a summary of discussion, if I've gotten a verbal warning, and then I'm at that written level, I should know that I need to respond to that, or I'm not going to be employed with this company very much longer.
Or if you had a like a personal improvement plan, or an employee development plan, like I should know better. I mean, now little parenthesis. I found the TSA to be overwhelming when I was traveling in the U.S. I had traveled before in my country, and no problem. Like there's literally no problem. Would you go through, all of the security process real quick? But then when I was in the States, I was like, why do they have to scan me? Why do they have to touch me? Why do they have to do this? It was so annoying because, at least in Mexico, we really don't have any airplane problems. We've never had it. Well, I mean, I know we had like little issues, but we've never had like any security stuff like in the U.S. So for me, traveling, to the U.S., I mean, I already have to go through customs. I mean, already need to go, have to, pick up my luggage and then have someone else check it and then go to TSA for my next flight, and it's really annoying. I just think it's a lot of unnecessary wasted time, or at least they could have made a more efficient, system. But I don't know. I'm not into that part of the airline, of their industry. So I found it to be very annoying.
It's true. It's a lot.
And I'm dreading that right now that I'm traveling, next month. I'm like, oh, great, I'll go through TSA, and I'm going through Houston, so I'll have to go through TSA and customs, and I have like 2 hours to make my connection. So I'm
Well,
having a nightmare.
now you have something to watch for.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like, I wonder what would happen if I run and hit the TSA guard doesn't see me.
Don't try it.
Don't.
I know,
Okay.
right? I don't recommend that.
I know, I'm just kidding. I know I'll get deported and something bad's gonna happen.
Then you won't be able to come to the class on Wednesdays. It'll be
Yeah, no big ideas, Isaac.
I'm gonna be missing one of our meetings because I'm gonna be in a wedding at the same time.
Okay,
That's a bummer.
good. Well, so yeah, with corrective action, it needs to be progressive, and with the other readings, positive if possible. My big plug on corrective action is the first thing I mentioned. So if somebody's getting terminated, they shouldn't be surprised. The second thing is it needs to be the goal of a written warning or a verbal warning is to help that person improve and change their behavior. Right? We're not getting after them, but a lot of times I don't think we catch that. We're saying, "Oh, I'm going to write you up because I'm fed up with you, and I'm giving you this written warning." We have to have the right mindset because we're trying to improve behavior, but then we've got the expectation set so that if that doesn't improve, we need to move forward if we need to separate employment. So we have to it keeps our conscience clear if we're doing that correctly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The other scenario, sorry, I'm cruising through a few thoughts I had just because I know we're running up on time, but have any of you had the scenario or been in a situation where you've seen a manager or been a manager and you're just like, oh, this person, I'm ready to fire them, I'm fed up with them, I'm frustrated with this person. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. Well, as an HR person, those people come to me and they say, oh, I'm fed up with this person, they've been doing bad for this long, and I want to fire them, I just need to get them out. And I say, okay, what has the previous conversations been? Do you have any documentation? Did we do any corrective action? And they say, no, but they are performing terrible. What's wrong with that picture?
Well, that's kind of the picture that happens to a lot of managers and supervisors. They're so busy trying to keep things flowing that they don't take the corrective action and give people the notices that they should give, the verbal and the counseling. And so all of a sudden they do get fed up because things do escalate. And that's where somebody gets slapped in the face one week with a verbal and the next day with a written, because people have had it up to here, because sometimes the supervisors and managers don't have time to supervise and manage.
Mm-hmm.
And then another time, yes, I was in a situation where I went to my boss and said, I've had it up to here with so-and-so. I said, you've got a choice. I'm not going to deal with him and what he's doing any longer. You can fire him or I'll leave. And it wasn't a pretty situation. And I was more than willing, I wasn't going to put up with it any longer. And, sad to say, this person got fired, but he had had a lot of counseling on what he was supposed to do. And he just figured he did so well in some areas, and he did amazing in some areas, but his refusal to do that just caused some real problems across the board.
Well, and like you said, they had the action behind it already.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, just going back directly to what you were saying, if somebody doesn't have feedback and they don't know that they're doing something that maybe is annoying someone, or I think that's why, like you called it progressive counseling. I think that that's really important. I mean, somebody just might be completely oblivious that they're being offensive, or that they're doing something that needs to be changed. And so I think it's really important to have that feedback, which whether it's verbal or written or whatever it is, just so that you can say to them, this is the problem, and then they can, they have the opportunity to kind of maybe repeat back to you, just make sure that it's understood, so that people can get better, people can improve. And that's, I mean, really, that's, I don't know about all of you, but for me, that's kind of what helps me, is that when I get feedback wherever, whether it's from my husband or my children or my workers, then I have the opportunity to say, am I going to improve? Am I going to do better? And then that responsibility really comes off of your shoulders, and it's put onto their shoulders, whether they really want to stay there and do what it takes to stay there. I think. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's kind of
True for me. True for me. Any of my bosses that have been giving me clear feedback and said, hey, you've got this to work on, I'm grateful for it. Even if in the moment it's like, ooh, that stings. Yeah, that hurts a little. But later I'm like, hey, thanks for being honest with me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Okay, so I'll tell you something that happened to me. So I used to work at the front desk when I first started at this company that I'm at now, and it just was like the main thoroughfare, and people would stop by my desk and chat, and and so our COO said, he talked to the business manager, and he said, okay, so Tammy, you need to stop talking so much. He goes, the thing is that when I see people, he goes, I think it's really important to form good relationships. He said, but when I see 3 people talking to you, then I just think money, like how much money is being used up. And, and I told him, so I said to him like a couple of weeks later, or actually it was about 3 weeks later, I just was talking to him, and I said, I just want you to know something. I hadn't ever considered that perspective of, of it being money. I was just thinking of it as building friendships and strengthening like that, that company bond. And I said, but since you've told me that, I have completely changed, my thought about it, and I am working on that very, very hard. And so anyway, so it's something that does not come easy to me to cut people off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I've had to work at it to try and be, like you turn from people and start on your computer, or excuse me, I have to finish up this project or whatever. But I mean, I just learned more creative ways to end conversations. So, but it was an opportunity, and I had no idea, and I hadn't even thought of that before. But it was a really good opportunity for me to improve.
Excellent. Perfect example. Yeah. Appreciate that. Any final thoughts? Ashley, any final thoughts from what you've learned this week?
I actually really like that comment that you just said a while back, that if people get fired, they shouldn't be surprised. I think that was probably one of the best takeaways that I got from this meeting, because I think HR is really fascinating, and I think if you're in that position to hire or fire someone, it shouldn't come as a surprise. And I thought that just fit perfectly with the case study, so I really like that.
Good. Good. Isaac, Rosemary?
Well, I'm not running when I go through TSM.
Good idea.
No, but it's just that I also like that, and not to copy, Ashley. It was a really good point, because people get offended. I mean, at least I've seen people getting offended, and the guy that I fired was very mad at me. But I was like, you shouldn't be surprised. And second of all, I mean, developing like if you're setting a discipline at work, we usually go for the negative side of discipline of, oh, we're going to punish a person, or we're going to, try to get him out of the company. When in reality, if you hire the person and you're seeing that person is struggling, well, you got to do first your part. You got to demonstrate that you're willing to help and cooperate. And if, by offering your help, he's not making any progress or changes, well, then you have valid reasons and documentation to back that up. I mean, when I was a supervisor, they gave me the worst agents on the whole company, and that was funny. Like, I knew the guys. I got along. I get along with everyone at work. Well, I used to get along with everyone at my previous job, so I didn't see them as the worst agents. I just saw them as great people, and they were really great. They just had certain things that they needed to change and work on, but that's the problem, that sometimes one discipline to be like a punishing relationship, when in reality it should be more like raising a child. I mean, you're not gonna go ahead and yell at your child, and tell him he's doing all things wrong and he's a bad person and stuff. You're gonna develop the kid, and you're gonna you might have to be a little bit strict with with him, but it's like you gotta do your part. You can't expect the person to change by himself. If you need to help him first, if he's not willing to make the change, or if he's not willing to commit, well, you can say goodbye to your job eventually, I guess. If you're not willing to abide by something that you say you were gonna do.
I like it. Rosemary, what were you going to say?
No, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I stole the spotlight.
That's okay. My mind has heat fog out here. It's probably got to about 115, 117 today.
Oh, wow.
Where do you live, Rosemary?
I'm in Las Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
And so I can claim the heat.
That's pretty hot.
Yeah, that's terribly hot. Well, good. Well, thanks for gathering. Tammy, thanks for example and feedback. Feedback's huge. Take feedback. It'll move you forward faster than anything. The scripture, I've mentioned it in other weeks, but the scripture in section 121, Doctrine and Covenants, reprove betimes with sharpness when moved upon by the Holy Ghost, comes to mind. I'm thankful for that. So moving with sharpness means being timely. Okay, so if we need to give feedback, we need to give feedback in that moment, or hold off if if we need to, but make sure it's at the right time. And same with progressive counseling, same with our management, same with anything we do in our relationships. Use the spirit to give the feedback in the way that will benefit that person. I think if we develop that skill and be prayerful about that skill, we can receive feedback well, and we can also give feedback well. So no one's surprised when consequences take place. So appreciate the discussion. It really is fascinating. There's a lot that can go into this. Is how merciful should we be? How just should we be? And finding that balance is always a case-by-case thing. So think about that. I'm sure you'll run into situations where you might have to make those decisions, and hopefully this week was helpful to you. We'll end there. Anybody have any questions? Okay. If you do, let me know. And I appreciate it. Have a good rest of the week.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.